So good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. I say good morning to you, and I mean that. And as I hear you, I'm hearing the energy of that good morning coming right back. So yesterday, we kind of just settled in to the theme of practicing together, bringing our contemplative practices, our deep commitments, our meaning-making projects for how we might want to live as best we can, the moments that we have on this beautiful planet Earth. How we bring all of that to bear on the work of examining the call for racial justice in this moment, in this time, in this place and beyond. We're meeting today on the day after a rich engagement at this conference. Whew, the power of it still resonating with me very deeply. And we will, in this session, invite a kind of a gathering, feeling all of the rivers of your life story and how some of what you've heard, some of what you've listened deeply to, spoken about, how it brings alive what you know in your bones about race and racism. What do you know? What do you know about racism as a personal, interpersonal, and systemic collective dynamic? Its way of maintaining separations, policing boundaries around our hearts. One of the questions that came up last night was, where is your love? What has racism taught us about whom we can love and not, with whom we can stand up for justice and not, when we can safely raise our voices for justice and speak freely or not? How have we been silenced by it? The many ways that silences support racism are part of what, I will just say, folks who are examining mindfulness as a support, sometimes if they've not, if they're racial justice advocates, one of the comments I not infrequently receive is a question about, well, is mindfulness really a support for digging deeply into racial justice, or is it supporting us in our kind of passivity or our silence? So the invitation then is to ground ourselves in intentionality about how we seek to practice as a support for healing the wounds of racism within ourselves, within our communities, in the broader world in which we live. Having that as the intention, not as a side benefit, but at the core. Let's imagine that for this day. Let's imagine that for this day. So I really want to, I actually, of course, always have many notes and slides. And any of you who've seen my presentations know I will sit with you in the space of where I really am. And this morning, it somehow came onto my heart, the question, what's going on? This is the day after not only this very powerful full day in this conference, but the sharing of the Rittenhouse verdict, the Kyle Rittenhouse trial verdict, in which Mr. Rittenhouse was found not guilty of a number of charges associated with the killing of 2 men, the wounding of a third, the shooting of 3 men, the killing of 2. There are many things that can be said, will be said about that trial, but I really want us to pause together and invite what really is going on. What's going on in our country? What are the messages that we are receiving about race and racism explicitly and implicitly in this moment, including through that verdict, but not only there? Do y'all mind if I sing a little before offering praxis? I hope not. Mother, mother, there's far too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. Ooh, you know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Get lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see, oh, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Bringing the mourning mothers of all backgrounds into this space, including the mothers of the murdered victims, the unjustifiably killed victims of Kyle Rittenhouse, bringing the families who have suffered from unjustified violence in the many wars around race that have comprised our existence together. I practice and teach in some way with humility, contemplative practice as a support for healing the wounds of racism, partly because the wounds are in my heart, and I know they're in yours. Whew. So good morning, everyone. Good morning. I want to invite us just to pause. I'm going to bring the bell here and invite just a bit of silent gathering. I'll lightly guide. as we settle in to these few moments of practicing together. The invitation is to allow your attention to rest on the sensations of being a body alive here. Feet on the floor, buttocks in the chair, perhaps the back resting against the back of the chair. Just feeling these points of contact between your soft body, soft belly, strong back, inviting a sense of the energy of life within you as you breathe in and out. Perhaps focusing just for a moment on the sensation of breathing in, breathing out, wherever you happen to be in that cycle, and continuing to follow along with the breath as an anchor. Just gently feeling the caressing of body by air. This very gentle, so loving. This experience of breathing, renewing, restoring, being alive. Each moment that we breathe, an opportunity to remember the preciousness of our lives, that we breathe as a gift. And remember the connection between body and the so-called environment. Breathing in, the oxygen, breathing out, carbon dioxide, this beautiful cycle of life of which we are all a magnificent part. Honoring and respecting the life within each of us here and in the communities that we are privileged to connect with beyond this circle, which means everyone. Each breath also an opportunity to begin again. So breathing in, sensing what is well. Breathing out, letting go. Settling in just a bit more to the sense of being held by the earth. If you're willing and open to it, by my voice, by each other here in this space, and the broader community who are joining us online. Breathing in, noticing as you do so there's any place where you're holding any tightness, feeling any pain, any discomfort, difficult emotions, and wherever that might be, inviting opening up, bearing witness to your own experience as you breathe in and out, seeing if you can bring kindness to whatever might be ailing you in this moment, wherever you might be suffering, any pain, emotionally or otherwise. Again, maybe placing that hand over the heart, one hand over the belly button if that soothes, inviting this gentle support right in, right here, right now. The first teachings about compassion must be teachings about compassion for ourselves. Where do you struggle to meet your own suffering with kindness? And how can you meet it with love right here, right now? Yes, even the struggle. As best you can. Breathing in and breathing out, and again, bringing light and kindness to whatever might be ailing us in this moment. Sensing the light already within you, however small it might be, maybe looking for it in this moment. Light, warmth, opening, softening. Kindness. As we breathe in, feeling where we're feeling any of those indications of our own compassion for ourselves in this moment, the suffering we feel, the wounds we carry. And as we breathe out, maybe imagine expanding the light, the warmth, the love, the kindness down through the body, through the torso, wherever you're feeling it, throughout the body, down to the feet, up again through the legs, lower torso, upper torso, shoulders, neck lifting up, feeling the uplift. That in of itself a teaching, a practice. Feel the dignity of the body and the lift of the spine, up through the crown of the head. Breathing in and out. As you breathe out, letting go, relaxing, releasing, feeling the support. Feeling the restoration of a good cleansing deep breath. In. And a deep, rich, full breath out. How often do we fully allow the lungs to release, exhale? Noticing, is it well? Is there some way in which we are well and strong? Feeling supported. If it's elusive in this moment, that's okay too. But seeing if we can search for that inner resource, the inner light that we're called to amplify at this time. Just imagine that inner light within you, however small it might be in the moment, See if you can imagine it maybe expanding, maybe expanding. Imagine that a person sitting close to you might be able to sense a little bit of it, that heart energy. Now just imagine, if you will, just that the ripples and waves of care, of love and warmth that are within you might be expanding outward. The invitation would be to sort of send it outward, gently just open up, you might say, to whatever is within your heart, within your being, that is healing, that is loving. Open it up, allow it to flow out. Wherever it might need, go and be. You don't have to worry too much about the directionality to it in this moment. Just be open to allowing what is well and loving within you to flow out. Right here, right now. Knowing that we have enough for ourselves to be within the flow of that love. So as we begin to draw this meditation to a close, sensing into your intentions, what brought you here to this particular session, to this beautiful conference, gathering by the river. What brought you here? And let me ask again, what really brought you here? Let go of that answer. What really, really brought you here? One of my teachers said, maybe when we get to the fourth or fifth really, we might be getting to that core truth. Can we give ourselves enough space and time to feel our deepest intentions? To envision our collective healing, our highest, best offering today and beyond? What's your intention? And from the place of that intention, what's your highest and best gift? What's your original medicine for these times? How do you envision racial justice in your life, in your community, in this community? May we each and all be filled with loving kindness. May we be well in body and in mind. May we be safe from inner and outer dangers. May we each and all be truly joyful, easeful, and free. Greetings. everyone. Good morning. Good morning again, yes. Beginning again, this unrepeatable moment. How are you? How are we? How are we feeling? How are we feeling? What's alive in you? Are we in touch with that original medicine? With your highest and best? I want to share a little bit about how this call to bring forth our deepest understandings of what it means to live with purpose and meaning may support us more deeply in the work of racial justice. Those of you who've done me the honor and pleasure of reading my book or opening up any of it, you may have seen my definition for racial justice is very much about love, right? Love in action for the healing of the wounds of racism against its most vulnerable, targeted victims, but really all of us. I'm not alone in using the word love as a way of thinking about what justice means, but as a law professor, I can tell you, it's not so that everybody in law uses love when we think about what justice means. So opening up the aperture on what racial justice might look like and infusing some of the ancient teachings. Love thy neighbor as thyself. The Four Noble Truths, core teachings from the teacher known as the Buddha. There is suffering. You'll see that I've added there's racial suffering. There are many kinds of sufferings, including suffering around the issues, the identities, this idea, this notion of race, an idea, a set of trainings that we're imbibing every day, right? It's not a thing that was created back in the day that has no particular purchase on any of us because we have evolved beyond it. On a certain sense, that may be true for any one of us, and is that the whole truth? Each of us as socially embedded beings are being met every day with new teachings about what race and racism means. We can't avoid it. How are we relating to those teachings? The social teachings, the cultural teachings about whose lives matter and whose voices matter, whose freedom of speech will be protected, whose rights to protest will be protected, and whose won't. There is racial suffering. There is a cause of racial suffering. There are causes of racial suffering. Like there are causes of all our suffering. The Buddha talked about, and I speak about the teachings of the Buddha. Those of you who were with me yesterday know I am a child of the South, raised in a Christian household with the teachings of Christ very, very affirming and heart-opening for me, the teachings around love and justice that I took away from Christ's witnessing and offerings. And I am a student of the teachings of the Buddha. And I just named those. I teach mindfulness in secular settings all the time, but at this conference, the Festival of Faiths, I am inspired to speak more about the religious foundations of the work that I do around justice and around seeing more clearly through the lens of what we call mindfulness. Causes of suffering. Attaching to that which is always changing. Craving something that is eluding us. Aversion to something that's coming our way. I don't want that. I don't want that. Well, but I don't want to see that. Denial. Is there denial around issues around race and racism? Is there craving for a way things used to be that is no longer so? Is there that invitation to reattach to some identity and get firm about it and feel strength by it? The teachings of the Buddha would suggest that right in those moves, suffering arises, attaching to something that's inevitably not permanent. Notions of identity around race, not permanent, not real in a certain sense. Socially, they have meaning in the world in which race has been made and created and reinforced. It has effects. But that in and of itself doesn't mean that race itself is real. It just means that it's real in its social consequences. Can we hold the complexity of that? It can be real in its political consequences. In that sense, there's some sociologists who use the term racecraft to remind us that race can operate a little bit like witchcraft, and the idea of witchcraft did in the earlier part of the history of this country, the New England witch trials. Once you begin to believe that a thing called witchcraft and that there are witches, you can be killed if people believe you are one, whether there is a true thing called witchery or not. Your life can be made vulnerable because people believe it exists and believe you to be someone who is a threat because of it. Racecraft, this idea that suggests that sometimes race operates that way. We begin to believe it's real and believe that certain people are threats because of it. And therefore, their lives may be more vulnerable, actually, even though the idea of race is not real. Does that make sense? So really looking at how we get ourselves tied up, caught up, suffering around race and racism. There is an end to that, though. Hallelujah, as we would say in my Christian household growing up. There is an end to the suffering. There can be an end to the suffering that we cause around racism. Getting back in touch with a clearer seeing is, I think, a really important foundation for that. That seeing is not necessarily simple because there is complexity here. We are often seeing multiple complex realities, but we can see complexity with clarity, and that's an advance toward justice. That's an advance toward ending the suffering. In the teachings of the Buddha, there's a path to ending the suffering through practice. It's the traditional eightfold path is what it's called. Right view, seeing things more clearly. The first factor on that path, understanding how we suffer, why we suffer, clinging, attaching to that which is changing, pushing away that, denying. Is there denial around race and racism? Is that a part of the suffering? What do we know about that? And ignorance, confusion, the third way that we suffer in that triad of teachings. I mentioned the first two before, the third I didn't. Ignorance, confusion, being in a fog of not knowing, avoiding knowing, and being in the fog of not knowing. How many of us have seen that kind of suffering around race and racism? So right view about practicing to see more clearly, even complexity. And understanding the constructed nature, the way we are creating this thing called race in the way that we are, in relationship to the messages in relationship to the teachings, in relationship to the news, in relationship to the politics. Right intention to minimize the attachment, the greed, the pushing away, the hatred, the aversions, the delusion, the confusion. Practicing, inviting the will to see more clearly and to minimize the effects of the confusion. Right speech, practicing to minimize the harm that can come with how we speak. Are we in a time where right speech might be an aid to helping minimize the harms of race and racism? Right action. Every action matters. No small actions when it comes to seeking to address race and racism. Smiling at each other, even if just with the eyes beneath the mask, that matters. Turning toward each other, as we who were here last night were able to do. I'm always tempted to invite a looking at each other practice, but I know it's early in the morning for folks who are here in Louisville. And many of us have just come for like a little bit of like love, not necessarily the intensity of an eye contact practice. But remember the power of the eye contact if you can. And I know that for many reasons, eye contact may not be your particular way of connecting with other human beings. We're differently acculturated to feeling a certain kind of way around eye contact. But I invite you to just maybe see what might be possible there to explore, or if you're willing. Those of us who were here last night felt some of the power of that, turning toward another and seeing ourselves in the other, the love for ourselves, extending that to the other. Can we do that as a practice throughout this day silently? A kind of right action coming from a right view, right intention. Right livelihood, seeking to minimize the suffering by the things that we do to make a living, and right effort, the energy, even when we're tired. I know we're tired. But that breath of life can provide the energy for the effort to love across lines of real and perceived difference, because it sometimes is an effort. We all have some legitimate reasons to distrust each other at this time, especially across lines of race. Am I right? We have been given narratives and experiences, and can we nevertheless resource ourselves in right view and love in our hearts, in the sense that we're all inherently interconnected, related, one family, and with the next unrepeatable moment begin again toward the vision of our highest and best. Right mindfulness, aware of our soft-bellied, carbon-based, vulnerable beings, soft heart, even supported by this strong back. We're all vulnerable. And how we relate to that with our thoughts and our feelings can reinforce the separations, the clinging, right? I'm vulnerable. Well, I need to just sort of defend myself. The thoughts, the emotions that can close our hearts. Right concentration, the practices that help us restore and come back to a sense. All of these practices are among those that I lean into, that I've invited us to lean into in these couple of days. RAIN is a portable way of thinking about what mindfulness offers in this work, that we recognize when we're getting caught in a story, a partial story perhaps, in an emotional reactivity perhaps, that we accept for the moment, I'm feeling anger and rage, I'm feeling despair or sadness, I'm feeling grief, right? We recognize it and we accept, at least for the moment. We're not at war with reality. We're feeling sad, we're feeling sad. We're feeling rage, we're feeling rage. We're feeling love, we're feeling love. Let that be something we accept. I investigate. Where did that sadness come from all of a sudden? Where did the rage come from? What is the underpinning of that rage? What values, what deep intentions, what do I love that's been threatened that is now, I'm feeling this rage reaction as a result of that? Inquiry, investigate the feelings. Don't stop here, let's go deep. With as little attachment as we can muster. I'm a lawyer, so I know people attach to ideas very easily. I'm an academic, right? We do this. We make an identity, right? So let's soften that ego as we do this. It's not about making a new story of me. It's about inviting more of that story of we and of this life, the more than human world as a part of that, the environment, all of it, this life. So recognize, accept, investigate with non-attachment. The RAIN practice to support us in those moments where we get caught up, feel reactive, feel strong emotion. Pause, take a conscious breath, stop. ST, take a conscious breath, observe the thoughts, emotions, sensations that are coming up. P, proceed, perhaps reigning this awareness. I'm recognizing it, I'm accepting it. I'm curious about it, but I'm not going to get stuck there. The teachings, the ancient wisdoms teach us. We want to teach about suffering and the end of suffering. Really, at the end of the day, that's my complete religion. Want to understand suffering and how we end it, with kindness, with love. So I offer these reflections on the practices as a support for thinking about how to come back to, we are all just one human family who often forget who we are. That's my grandma, Nan Suggs, her teaching, very similar to the Dalai Lama's, of the many problems we face today. One such, arising out of our conflicting ideologies, political or religious, when people fight one another over their beliefs, losing sight of the basic humanity binding us together as one human family. My brothers, sisters, siblings, non-binaries, beloved community. What if all of our spiritual practices, communities, all of them were founded in a commitment to moral action in the face of racial wounding for repair and healing? How might we get there? That's our charge. That's why I'm here and why I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you, my dear ones. I believe that we can create practices and resources, communities founded on love. I answer that with a resounding yes, we can. And I offer my sistership, my one hand here as a support for your journey, your part. We're all in this together. We all have a role to play in the healing that's called for in this time. So these slides will be made available. They have all these little teaching acronyms that we mindfulness teachers will bring. Gathering with grace is what we may do as we walk toward the river this afternoon. Recalling our deep intentions, attuning to ourselves and others, considering consciously what would serve and taking actions, energize, effort to do the service that we're called to do, engage and then end and rest, because we need to rest sometimes. I vow to keep practicing in communities with the goal of seeing the love in my heart and the love in yours, motivated by this sense of justice as what love looks like in public, if we have the courage to make it so. Thank you for your practice, my dear ones. Thank you for your being here. Pausing with you, inviting breath in, breath out, coming back home. to the love that is what justice looks like in poverty.